Usually when we evaluate whether something is, actually successful, we look for a very specific, obvious metric.
Right.
Like in sales, it's the revenue.
Yes.
In sports, it's the final score on the board. So you would naturally think that the ultimate test of a joke would just be, well, whether it gets a laugh, right?
Yeah.
It seems completely binary, clean.
Exactly. The assumption is pretty much you tell a joke, people laugh,
Mm.
and it worked.
Yeah,
And if you tell a joke and there's just dead silence,
it totally failed.
right, it failed. Because human beings, we really love that kind of immediate, visible validation.
But the research we are diving into today completely flips that metric on its head. It turns out the ultimate test of a joke isn't actually the laugh at all.
No, it's not.
The true measure of a successful joke is whether it's considered appropriate for the moment.
Which fundamentally changes our whole perspective. I mean, it moves humor from being this wild, unpredictable party trick that only a select few are born with.
Right, like being double jointed or something.
Exactly. It moves it from that into a highly calculated diagnostic tool.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking the mechanics of comedy and why humor is secretly, well, the ultimate weapon for work, leadership, and honestly, just navigating the complexities of life.
Yeah, it really is.
If you've ever thought that being funny is just some innate talent, like having perfect pitch, we are going to completely dismantle that idea today. We are breaking humor down into an actionable, learnable framework.
And by the time we wrap up, the goal is for you to, stop looking around a room and asking what's funny and start asking what is the hidden fact here.
I love that shift.
It's huge. Internalizing that one shift is going to seriously upgrade your professional toolkit.
Yeah.
And I mean, it might just completely reframe how you look at some of your major life choices.
Okay, let's unpack this because before we even look at how to be funny, we really need to understand why we should risk it in the first place.
Right. The stakes feel high.
They do, because trying to be funny, especially in a corporate setting, it feels like walking barefoot through a minefield. But the sources outline the real, tangible return on investment for using humor, and they break it down into 4 distinct effects.
Yeah. And the first effect is power.
Okay.
When you use humor effectively, it actually projects high status and intelligence. It influences how people act, how they make decisions, and it makes your ideas significantly more memorable.
Wait, I have to push back on this power aspect a little bit.
Sure.
Isn't humor at work incredibly risky when it comes to status?
Yeah.
Like, won't I look unprofessional or, like the office clown if I'm always cracking jokes during a tense quarterly review? How does that equal power?
See, that is the exact fear that holds people back. But let's look at the psychology behind it. Humor signals intelligence because it proves you can instantly read a room.
Oh, I see.
You're synthesizing complex information and subverting expectations in real time. You just cannot fake that kind of mental processing speed. So when you land a perfectly timed observation, people implicitly recognize your cognitive agility.
Ah, so it's not really about the joke itself, it's the mental processing speed required to construct it on the fly.
Precisely. And connecting this back to our opening hook, it is all about appropriate strategic humor. You aren't trying to be like a stand-up comic doing a tight 15 minutes in the boardroom.
Please don't do that.
Right, don't do that. The data shows that just a mere glimpse of humor is enough to humanize you. It signals quiet confidence, not foolishness.
So if humor establishes this aura of competence and power, does that change how people interact with you on a personal level? Because usually, highly competent, powerful people can seem, well, kind of intimidating or unapproachable.
That leads perfectly into the second effect, which is connection. Humor bridges that gap instantly.
How so?
Well, if you just met someone, a shared laugh acts as an immediate icebreaker because it requires a bit of shared vulnerability. And for long-term colleagues, laughing together deepens existing bonds and brings this profound sense of satisfaction to the working relationship. You're basically telling the other person, hey, we see the world the exact same way.
Which brings us to the third effect, creativity. And here is where the neuroscience gets really interesting to me. The literature talks about how humor shatters a cognitive bias called functional fixedness.
Yes.
Can you explain exactly how that works? Because it sounds super academic.
It does, but it's actually pretty simple. Functional fixedness is our adult tendency to only see an object or a situation for its traditional use. As we grow up, our brains get very efficient at categorizing things, just to save energy.
Okay.
So you look at a blank wall and your brain immediately says, that is a structural boundary, ignore it. But a toddler looks at that exact same wall and says, that is a giant, beautiful canvas for my crayons.
Right, they don't have the rigid rules yet. They just see pure possibilities.
Exactly. Toddlers don't have functional fixedness. And as adults, laughter is the neurological mechanism that helps us temporarily overcome that rigid bias.
Wait, really? Just laughing does that.
Yeah. When we laugh, we get a rush of endorphins, and our brain literally, physically opens up. We suddenly notice hidden associations and lateral connections that we were completely blind to just a moment ago.
Wow.
It allows us to pitch those risky, unconventional ideas because the walls of our rigid thinking have just been knocked down.
So laughter actually breaks the neurological rules we set for ourselves. That is wild. But what happens when the stress isn't just a mental block, but an actual tangible failure? Does humor help us bounce back from that?
It absolutely does, which is the fourth effect.
Hmm.
Resilience. Humor buffers stress. It acts as a psychological shock absorber.
A shock absorber, I like that.
Yeah, when you face a severe setback, finding the humor in the absurdity of the situation helps you recover your equilibrium. You just bounce back much faster.
So when you look at those four pillars, right? Power, connection, creativity, and resilience, you quickly realize humor isn't a distraction from work. It is a performance enhancer.
Totally.
Okay, so we know humor makes us smarter, more connected, and more resilient, but how do we actually produce it? I mean, I always assumed funny people just had, I don't know, different brain chemistry.
A lot of people think that.
But it turns out comedy has a strict engineering formula.
It really does. It's not magic, it's math. And the foundational rule, the absolute root of all humor, is that it is based on shared facts.
Shared facts, not just making stuff up.
Right. It is not about making up absurd random things out of thin air. A shared understanding of the truth is the baseline for every single joke.
Which is exactly why the central mission of this deep dive isn't to ask what's funny, but to train yourself to ask what's the hidden fact.
Precisely. Because once you identify that hidden shared fact, you build the joke using specific mechanics.
Right.
And the most reliable mechanism is misdirection.
Also known as the rule of three, right?
Exactly. You provide two elements that perfectly align with what the audience expects to hear, which establishes a pattern. And then the third element completely subverts that expectation.
Like the classic example from the source material. This year, I got rich, famous, and humble.
Yes, it works perfectly because human beings inherently love to be surprised.
We do.
The incongruity between what our brains predicted, like, oh, he's going to say another brag, and what actually happened, humble, it creates a sudden cognitive tension.
And the laugh.
The laugh itself is just the physical release of that tension.
It's almost like being a stage magician. You use those first two elements of a list or the shared facts of a situation to make the audience look left.
Right.
You've actively trained their eyes to follow the pattern, and then boom, the punchline hits them from the right.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. You are controlling their attention. And another tool in this engineering kit is crafting metaphors.
How does that work in practice?
Well, you take a highly specific personal feeling you've observed, and you link it to a universally understood object. The key is finding the common characteristic between your weird specific emotion and the general public's understanding of that object.
Okay, so the formula gets the joke written, but the delivery is a whole other science. Excellent comedy isn't just read off a page, it has a melody and a rhythm.
Oh, the physical delivery is just as crucial as the written words. You have to utilize the pause right before the punchline.
To build the tension.
Exactly. You stretch the silence to build anticipation. You use gestures to mimic behaviors. You modulate your vocal pitch to adjust the pacing and the emotional weight of the words.
And you have to lean into it boldly. I mean, if you mumble the punchline because you're nervous, it dies on arrival.
It really does.
You also see professional comedians do this thing called stretching, where they physically walk across a stage and actually repeat the punchline or a variation of it, just to let the wave of laughter roll and extend the moment.
But listen, if memorizing formulas and practicing vocal modulation feels way too intimidating, there's a much simpler shortcut.
Thank goodness. What is it?
Tailoring. The absolute easiest way to get a genuine laugh is to make your observation hyper-specific to the exact people sitting in the room with you.
The example of this in the sources is brilliant in its simplicity. Imagine looking out at a packed audience and just saying, wow, so many people here. You all must have a lot of free time.
Right. And it works so well because it feels entirely exclusive.
Oh, sure.
It makes the audience feel like the joke was forged in real time just for them, based on the shared fact of their presence in that exact room at that exact moment.
So what does this all mean when we scale it up? If we take these mechanics from the individual level to the team level, how do these tools actually change the way a group operates, especially, when we talk about management?
This raises a critical point about the evolution of modern leadership. The old legacy model of leadership was all about being an aloof, flawless figurehead worshipped from afar. You
Yeah.
never showed weakness.
Right, the untouchable boss.
Exactly. But today's workforce demands leaders who are empathetic, grounded, and above all, understood.
And humor is the bridge to being understood. One of the most practical applications for managers is using compassionate humor to soften the blow of harsh feedback.
Yes.
You can deliver a difficult truth about poor performance without leaving the person feeling personally crushed.
hmm And it also completely transforms how we give recognition. I mean, we all crave praise, but the human brain has an incredibly sensitive alarm system for insincerity.
Oh, absolutely.
When a manager gives generic, robotic flattery, that alarm goes off immediately.
Like, great job on the spreadsheets today, team. Very synergistic.
Right, it feels completely hollow. They say that to everyone. But unexpected, playful praise is deeply meaningful. If a manager teases you slightly while praising your work, it proves that they didn't just passively notice your effort. They cared enough to craft a specific, unique response to it.
That dynamic is huge for brainstorming, too. Usually, a leader kicks off a creative meeting by saying, "Remember, everyone, there are no bad ideas."
Which is terrible advice.
Right, because ironically, it just makes everyone terrified of accidentally being the one to give the first bad idea.
Exactly. When people are afraid of judgment, their amygdala,
The threat center.
right, the threat center of the brain, it just lights up, they freeze. Instead, you should explicitly ask for the dumbest, craziest, absolute worst possible ideas right out of the gate.
Which completely lowers the stakes. You are bypassing the fear of judgment by making a bad idea the actual goal.
And that ties directly into building a resilient culture. Leadership expert Dana Bilge points out that the fear of disappointing people literally blocks our brain's ability to learn and process new information.
Wow.
When we are afraid, our cognitive aperture shrinks.
But laughter restores us. When a team fails a project, utilizing humor minimizes the psychological recovery time. It physically shortens the distance between a painful failure and the willingness to try again.
And to build that kind of resilient, fast-recovering culture, you can look at the foundational improv comedy concept of yes and. It is a masterclass framework for building team trust.
Let's actually walk through an example of that to see how it builds. So imagine someone starts a conversation by stating a simple, mundane fact. It's so hot today.
Yeah.
Now, if you just respond with, yeah, the interaction dies right there. You've hit a brick wall.
But if you use yes and, you actively accept their reality and add a new layer to it.
Yeah.
So you say, it's so hot, and I reply, yeah, it's hell.
I'm literally melting like wax.
Ah, told you not to climb into a dog's mouth.
See how fast that escalates into absurdity?
It's so quick.
That rapid-fire acceptance and expansion creates a shared, joyful reality. It proves you are deeply listening to each other and that you are willing to play.
And when you look at organizations that maintain this kind of joyful ecosystem, you find three distinct types of people who act as culture builders.
Who are they?
First, there are the instigators. These are the rebels who naturally do things differently and shake up the status quo.
Okay, the rebels.
Then you have the culture carriers. These are the natural leaders where a sharp sense of humor is a core part of their everyday charisma.
Makes sense.
Finally, you have the hidden gems. These are the quiet, diligent folks in the corner who surprise everyone by dropping a perfectly timed, hilarious comment out of nowhere.
I have a very practical question for you then. If you are listening to this and you are a manager, but you know deep down you are just not naturally a funny person, what's the play?
That's a great question.
Do you have to force yourself to become an instigator? Or is your job just to step back, set the stage, and let the hidden gems shine?
It is absolutely the latter. A leader's job is not to provide all the laughs. That's a total misunderstanding of the assignment.
Okay.
Your job is to create psychological safety so that the hidden gems feel comfortable enough to share their humor. You don't have to be the comedian. You just have to be a highly appreciative audience.
Okay, but we have to talk about the danger zone. We've talked about the power of yes and, but we have all witnessed a joke completely bomb, or much worse, deeply offend someone.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
What specifically causes humor to cross that line from appropriate to toxic?
To understand the boundary, we have to look at the classic comedy formula. Comedy equals tragedy plus time. That breaks down into three essential interacting elements: fact, pain, and distance.
Fact is the core, as we established earlier. We only truly laugh at what we recognize as true.
Yes. Then there is pain. This can be physical pain, mental anguish, embarrassment, or even severe trauma. Finding humor in that pain can bring immense healing catharsis.
But there's a catch, right?
A big one. That catharsis strictly requires the third element, distance. Distance can be chronological time, it can be geographic distance, or it can be psychological detachment.
It's like mixing highly volatile chemicals in a lab. Fact is, your base liquid. Pain is the highly explosive element, and distance is the containment shield.
That's a great analogy.
If that shield is too thin, if the pain is too severe and the chronological or psychological distance is too short, the experiment blows up in your face.
That's exactly right. If you make a joke about a colleague's messy divorce the day after it happens, there is zero chronological or psychological distance.
Mm,
It is perceived as incredibly hurtful and insensitive.
right.
But if you make a joke about a bad haircut they got 10 years ago, the distance is vast and the pain is minimal.
But when you get the alchemy exactly right, balancing the pain with just enough distance, the result is profound relief. It allows us to process incredibly difficult truths safely.
Which brings us to the final and honestly the most profound application of this entire framework. Zooming out from the workplace, from the mechanics of a punchline, we find that this alchemy of humor is deeply tied to the ultimate trajectory of our entire lives.
This is where we look at the end of life. Psychologists have connected the presence or absence of humor directly to the 5 most common regrets expressed by the dying.
Yeah,
Let's unpack the psychological weight of these. The first regret is a lack of boldness. I wish I lived older.
because fear is what prevents bold choices. We stay in safe, unfulfilling lanes because we are terrified of failing. But as we discussed with resilience, humor makes us open to change.
It gives us that safety net.
Exactly. It allows us to take big swings in life because we know we have the emotional shock absorbers to bounce back if we miss.
The second regret is authenticity. I wish I was true to myself. We spend so much exhausting energy conforming to the expectations of our parents, our bosses, and society.
And humor is the antidote to that conformity. Humor naturally draws out our unconventional, authentic side. When you fully embrace your own weird sense of humor, you inherently start caring less about the rigid boxes other people try to force you into. You become more yourself.
The third is presence. I wish I enjoyed the moment.
Well, because the very mechanics of humor require you to intensely observe shared reality to find the hidden facts, it forces you to anchor yourself in the now.
You can't be somewhere else mentally.
Right, you literally cannot find the humor in a room if your mind is ruminating on the past or panicking about the future.
The fourth is joy. I wish I laughed more.
Joy is not an accident that just happens to lucky people who have easy lives. It is a daily active choice. It is something we seek out by consciously deciding to take the world, and more importantly ourselves, a little less seriously.
And the final regret is love. I wish I said I love you.
Laughing together is, at its core, a small, incredibly generous act of love. It dismantles tension, it builds trust, and it tells the other person without using words, I see you, we are sharing this absurd reality, and we are in this together.
I am genuinely in awe of this connection. It is staggering to think that something as simple as a well-timed observation at a Tuesday morning staff meeting is fundamentally made of the exact same material that acts as the antidote to life's deepest, most existential dread.
It really does reframe everything. There's a psychological concept called the peak end rule, which states that people primarily remember the peak emotional moment of an experience and how that experience ends. They forget the mundane middle.
So summarizing all of this, humor is not a frivolous extra. It isn't a distraction from real work. It is a vital tool for connection, an advanced leadership strategy for building resilient teams, and a literal shield against end-of-life regret.
Beautifully said.
It is the signature of a life well lived, a heart full of joy and a smile on the lips.
Cultures shift over time. Businesses evolve and disappear. Traditions die and new ones are born to replace them. But through all of that flux, the fundamental human need to laugh remains a constant anchor.
So, we want to leave you with a final diagnostic test. Look at your own life right now. If you have gone a long period of time without experiencing humor, without a genuine deep laugh, something is fundamentally wrong. Your emotional x-ray is showing a fracture. Take a moment today to look around your office, your commute, or your living room. Don't stress yourself out by asking, what's funny? Instead, ask yourself, what is the hidden fact here? Look for the shared truth. And think about this. If laughter is our brain's way of rewarding us for discovering a hidden truth, maybe the things we find the least funny right now, our biggest stressors, our worst failures, are just truths we haven't found the right distance from yet. What happens if you look at your biggest stressor today and try to rate the punchline for a year from now? Because true humor isn't about landing the loudest laugh, it's about finding what is perfectly, beautifully appropriate for the moment you are in.